So now we can take what we've learned about the anatomy and the function of all the digestive organs, and now we can take it and help us to understand how nutrition works and the different type of nutrients that we absorb into our through our bloodstream into our bodies. So nutrition is basically the means by which different organisms take nutrients and basically use them. So there's two types of nutrients. There's macronutrients and then there's micronutrients. The reason why they have those terms, well, nutrient is just anything that our body needs in order to grow. Macro means that we need quite a bit of it, and micro means that we need less of it. They're still both important, and we need them both in order to survive and be healthy. It's just that we need a lot more of one than we do the other. So even though we need a little bit of micronutrients, we still need them in order to survive, in order to be healthy, because various micronutrients, such as vitamins and minerals, without those vitamins and minerals in our diet, we get different deficiencies. So there are 4 macronutrients, and they're considered to be the chemicals of life because basically the reason why we exist is because we have those nutrients in our body. So the 4 macronutrients found in our bodies are carbohydrates, which are comprised of starches and sugars. Then there's proteins. Then there are lipids, which are also known as fats. And then there's nucleic acids. And an example of a nucleic acid would be DNA. So you'll probably see this in the future in a short response question. It'll ask you what are the 4 types of micronutrients and explain what they are. So those 4 bullets are the 4 macronutrients. Carbohydrates is 1, proteins is the 2nd, lipids is the 3rd, and nucleic acids is the 4th. So the first one that we're going to talk about in this lesson is exclusively around carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are anything that is starchy, like bread, rice, pasta, or anything that is sweet. So various fruits and vegetables that are sweet, like apples, bananas, even green beans, things that aren't necessarily sweet, they do have a lot of starch in them and a lot of carbohydrates. So carbohydrates are one of our biggest sources of energy. And the reason why they're called carbohydrates, carbo comes from the word carbon, and hydrate comes from the word comes from water. So whenever we're referring to water, we say hydrate or hydration. And you can see here in this picture that this is a carbon dioxide molecule. So here's carbon, carbo, and here's a water molecule. That's where we get the hydrate from. So carbon from carbon dioxide and hydrate from water. So the carbon and the water together makes carbohydrates. So they're made of carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen. And we can break all the carbohydrates down into monosaccharides, which is what our body absorbs, disaccharides, which are just monosaccharides put together, and then polysaccharides, which are just a whole bunch of disaccharides put together. So you can see in this picture here, there are 3 examples of 3 different carbohydrates or 3 sugars. The reason why I know that they're sugars is because they're cyclic, meaning that they form sort of a ring, and they have 6 carbons in them. So here's a ring here, here's a ring here. They're all made of 6 carbon backbones. So this is fructose, this is glucose, and this is galactose. And our body uses all those sugars. So some terminology that you need to know before going into this lesson. You need to know what a monomer is. A monomer is just a single molecule, a single unit of a molecule. So if we say that this heart is a molecule, this is a monomer. A polymer is a bunch of monomers put together. So all of these hearts, these 7 hearts put together, this would be a polymer of the heart. So the monomer is the single unit, the polymer is the multiple unit. When you talk about polyester, the fabric that our clothes are often made out of, ester is the monomer, and the polymer is polyester. So if we take that heart molecule and make it into an actual molecule that our body uses, like glucose, okay, this is a glucose molecule right here, it's a sugar. This is the monomer, and when you make the polymer of it, a whole bunch of glucose is put together, that makes a starch. So a starch is a polymer, and glucose is a monomer. Now, when the monomer is specifically a cyclic structure like this, and is a sugar, we call it a monosaccharide. Saccharide means sugar, okay? So 1 sugar ring. So fructose, glucose, and galactose, they're all one ring big, 1 6-carbon ring, and they're all sugars, so it's a monosaccharide. If this wasn't a sugar, it could still be considered a monomer. It's just that when it's considered to be a sugar, it's called a monosaccharide. So we can take monosaccharides and we can pair them up. So if you take a glucose and add it to another glucose, you get maltose. And if you take glucose and add it to fructose, two different monomers, okay, you put them together, two different monosaccharides, you put them together, you make sucrose, and that's your table sugar. That's a sugar that you and I use for baking. And then if you take a galactose molecule and add it to a glucose molecule, so those two different molecules, if you take those two monosaccharides and put them together to make a disaccharide, lactose, and lactose is the sugar that we find in milk. People who are lactose intolerant can't break the bond in between the two sugars. So starch, cellulose, and glycogen are all examples of polysaccharides. It means you've taken a saccharide, a monosaccharide, like glucose, and you've put a whole bunch of them in one string. So if we take glucose and add it end on end multiple times, that makes a starch. And we already know that because we saw how amylase takes a starch and breaks it down into maltose and then into glucose. So if you have every second glucose molecule turned upside down, that makes a cellulose molecule. So the way that these glucoses are put together is going to change the function of the molecule. So this polysaccharide starch that's found in like potatoes and rice, cellulose is found in the cell walls of plants, and glycogen is like a type of fat storage or energy storage. So glycogen is a lot like a starch, except for instead of it being one straight polysaccharide of glucose, it's still made of glucose, but you have these little branches coming off of sides every so often. So even though they look relatively the same and they're made of all the same monomer, starch is made up of the monomer glucose, and so is cellulose, and so is glycogen. The way that the monomers are put together makes a different polysaccharide. So that's a starch, cellulose, glycogen, all have different functions, but they're all made of the monomer glucose.